Here is the history of NASA's Space Shuttle program, or just the history of NASA's Space Shuttle shuttles. Normally for a video, I would just go down the entire history in order, but for this video, since there's about, there is 7 shuttles in this video. I'm just gonna go down the list by explaining them individually, and then moving on to the next one in order of when they were launched and built. So starting off with number 1 is Pathfinder, not Mars Pathfinder, but this Pathfinder. This Pathfinder was the test shuttle for the next shuttle that would be launched, having been built and rode in 1977. It made 6 flights, which would, of course, like I just said, be invalid for the next one, Enterprise, which would have been rode out in 1976. Enterprise, however, was not actually eligible for space flight. So Enterprise was more of kind of like an airship, but still a shuttle. It wasn't really technically considered a space shuttle, since it could never actually go to space. It had its final flight in 1977, but was moved around a lot from the 80s to 2003, where it was resting in a museum, before eventually moving to New York in 2012, where it's currently on display. Columbia. Now, the Columbia Space Shuttle was the first actual space shuttle that would eventually go to space, having been built in 1975 and had its first mission in 1981, starting with the STS-1. It had 28 flights and 4,808 orbits before having its final flight on January 16th, 2003 with the STS-107. Its crew seen here. The mission went well before it eventually disintegrated during Earth entry. And of course, ending its final mission, Columbia officially disintegrated in 2003, putting an end to the spacecraft and its missions. Now, if the disaster never happened, it would eventually go to the ISS in November of 2003 and have it started to wind down by 2004 to 2005. However, since it disintegrated, none of this ever happened. Challenger was Columbia's successor, and it was slightly modified from Columbia following Columbia's first orbital flights. It carried the first American woman to go to space, Sally Ride, and the first African American man and astronauts to actually go to space, Glenn Stewart Bluford Jr. Challenger only had 3 years of flight experience when on January 28th, 1986. It had its final mission, dubbed STS-51L. It also partnered up with the Teacher in Space program, which would have sent the first ever teacher, Krista McAuliffe, into space. And about 1 minute and 13 seconds after launch, the Challenger shuttle exploded, most likely due to a leaked plume in one of its boosters. And now it's Discovery. Said was also kind of modified from Challenger, except it had one noticeable detail. It had a little teardrop feature right here. And Discovery eventually also on its very first mission, it carried the 4th American woman in space, Judith Resnick. And Discovery, since its launch in 1984, would have multiple flights and overtook a lot of records from Space Shuttle until the next one, before it ended in 2011 with the STS-133 mission. Afterwards, it was placed in a museum where it's currently on display in its original form. Atlantis was the final space shuttle built before the Challenger disaster in 1986, being launched prior to 1985. Atlantis did not have the teardrop feature like Discovery did, but Atlantis did have a lot of successful flights, and going to the Hubble Space Telescope included. Atlantis was actually the one that had the final mission, having landed in July 2011. Endeavour was built following the Challenger disaster in 1986, approved by the U.S. Congress to replace it. So, like I said, afterwards of the Challenger disaster, Endeavour was launched in about 1992 and had multiple successful flights and only actually lasted for about 19 years in the STS-134 mission. This was originally supposed to be the final space shuttle mission, but after the U.S. Congress approved the Atlantis STS-135, it was the second last mission. And following the Atlantis landing in Texas, the space shuttle program was officially ended after 39 years, which is impressive.